Radio is an intimate storytelling medium, and when it bonds with one of the finest storytellers of our times, the result is sheer magic. During these times of social distancing, All India Radio hopes to bring you some comfort, some connection, with an exclusive story reading series, Bonding over the Radio. Coming up is the pick of the day, voiced by the author Ruskin Bond himself.
The Parrot Who Wouldn't Talk. You're no beauty, can't talk, can't sing, can't dance. With these words, Aunt Ruby would taunt the unfortunate parakeet, who glared at everyone from his ornamental cage at one end of the long veranda of Granny's bungalow in northern India. In those distant days, almost everyone kept a pet parrot or parakeet, or lovebird as some of the smaller ones were called. Sometimes these birds became great talkers, or rather mimics, and would learn to recite entire mantras or admonitions to the children of the house, such as, "Paro beta paro," study child, study, or, for the benefit of boys like me, "Don't be greedy, don't be greedy." These expressions were, of course, picked up by the parrot over a period of time, after many repetitions, by whichever member of the household had taken on the task of teaching the bird to talk. But our parrot refused to talk. He'd been bought by Aunt Ruby from a bird catcher who'd visited all the houses on our road selling caged birds ranging from colorful budgerigars to chirpy little munyas, and even common sparrows that had been dabbed with paint and passed off as some exotic species. Neither Granny nor Grandfather were keen on keeping caged birds as pets, but Aunt Ruby threatened to throw a tantrum if she did not get her way, and Aunt Ruby's tantrums were dreadful to behold. Anyway, she insisted on keeping the parrot and teaching him to talk. But the bird took an instant dislike to my aunt and resisted all her blandishments. "Kiss, kiss," Aunt Ruby would coo, putting her face close to the bars of the cage. But the parrot would back away, his beady little eyes getting even smaller with anger at the prospect of being kissed by Aunt Ruby. And on one occasion he lunged forward without warning and knocked her spectacles off her nose. After that, Aunt Ruby gave up her endearments and became quite hostile towards the poor bird, making faces at him and calling out, "Can't talk, can't sing, can't dance," and other nasty comments. It fell upon me, then 10 years old, to feed the parrot, and he seemed quite happy to receive green chilies and ripe tomatoes from my hands, these delicacies being supplemented by slices of mango, for it was then the mango season. One afternoon, while everyone was indoors enjoying a siesta, I gave the parrot his lunch and then deliberately left the cage door open. Seconds later, the bird was winging his way to the freedom of the mango orchard. At the same time, Grandfather came onto the veranda and remarked, "I see your aunt's parrot has escaped." The door was quite loose," I said with a shrug. "Well, I suppose we won't see it again." Aunt Ruby was upset at first and threatened to buy another bird. We put her off by promising to buy her a bowl of goldfish. "But goldfish don't talk," she protested. "Well, neither did your bird," said Grandfather. "So we'll get you a gramophone. You can listen to Clara Gluck all day. They say she sings like a nightingale." I thought we'd never see the parrot again, but he probably missed his green chilies, because a few days later, I found the bird sitting on the veranda railing, looking expectantly at me with his head cocked to one side. Unselfishly, I gave the parrot half my mango. While the bird was enjoying the mango, Aunt Ruby emerged from her room and with a cry of surprise called out, "Look, my parrot's come back. He must have missed me. With a loud squawk, the parrot flew out of her reach and, perching on the nearest rose bush, glared at Aunt Ruby and shrieked at her in my aunt's familiar tones. "You're no beauty. You can't talk, can't sing, can't dance." Aunt Ruby went ruby red and dashed indoors. But that wasn't the end of the affair. The parrot became a frequent visitor to the garden veranda, and whenever he saw Aunt Ruby, he'd call out, "You're no beauty, you're no beauty, can't sing, can't dance, can't talk." The parrot had learned to talk, after all.
Thank you, sir. This story is so reminiscent of P.G. Wodehouse, Gerald Darrell, with all these aunts, uncles, birds, beasts, and other relatives.
Right. Well, of course, real aunts did play a role in my life because my mother had 3 sisters, and they were all my aunts, and in fact, they were married, so the husbands became uncles. And some of them were quite odd and eccentric. And I also grew up reading P.G. Wodehouse and other humorous writers like Jerome K. Jerome, and some of humorous writers always seem to find humor in their relatives. And there was P.G. Wodehouse's Aunt Agatha, who was a rather fearsome lady, and Aunt Dahlia, who used to bet on the races. So there were aunts and uncles to inspire me to write about my own. And fortunately, none of them are within close quarters, so they haven't been able to get at me with their walking sticks and airbrushes yet.
Sir, I'd like to read out a few responses from our listeners, if I may.
Carry on.
I'll begin with Priyal Malode. She's from Nashik, 15-year-old.
Right.
Priyal writes, when my father first mentioned the day before that you were to read your stories on All India Radio, I was really very delighted. I had longed to hear you read out to us one of your stories. I've been exceptionally fond of your writing ever since I'd been first introduced to your book, My Favorite Nature Stories by my father, when I was 8 years old. I must say they possess a charm that cannot be expressed in mere words. The antics of Toto the monkey and Uncle Ken have been my all-time favorite. Being a city girl, I never understood what it was like to live in a cottage in the mountains. I had always fancied the idea. You have expressed it so well in your story of Miss Mackenzie, and there is some comfort staying in a cottage in a desolate place with an old landlady. It gives me such a thrill. I'm waiting for the publication of your next collection of stories, and I have to see you soon after this pandemic.
Oh, great. So, well, I came to live in Mussoorie about 50 years back, and I took this cottage near the forest. It was called Maplewood. And I did have this old landlady who was there for about 10 years before she passed on about the age of 90. So that cottage was in the forest, and there was, see, a lot of birds and animals. I wrote about them too. And then I moved up the hill. I promoted myself to the top of the mountain. There's no forest here, but I get a great view of the clouds, of the roads leading into the hills, and the birds come here too. They sit on the lamppost outside my window. Life in the hills has its charm, and it's helped me as a writer over the years.
Okay, this is Soham Bhattacharya, who's a student. He says, I have met Ruskin sir when he was in SNU the previous year. My question to sir is, who is sir's favorite author and poet? I'm a fan of my favorite contemporary author of English and would be really grateful if my question is asked. Soham.
Well, yes, Soham. Thank you for your question. Well, there have been many favorite authors over the years, starting with my school days and Dickens and the Brontes, and then lighter readers like P.J. Wodehouse and others. But I do have a few favorite poets, and every night before I go to bed, I'll read a poem or two, because they have to give me a pleasant sleep and even nice dreams sometimes. The last thing to do is watch TV late at night, because with all the terrible news that keeps coming, you'll only have nightmares. So my recommendation is read a poem or two, or a happy story. And my favorite poets would have been Walter de la Mare, John Clare and R.L. Stevenson, Wordsworth, Robert Frost, so many. And you'll find your own favorite poets if you go exploring the poetry anthologies.
12-year-old Rehan writes from Kolkata. Excellent time pass during the lockdown time. My question for Mr. Bond is, we heard that endangered animals can be seen in roads and dolphins are found in the Ganges. So how is this lockdown having a great role in bringing nature back, which we humans have destroyed? Please ask him this question to answer. Rehan.
Yes, Rehan, the birds and animals are having a great opportunity to wander about freely on this planet that they inherited. It's great to see them. But the only sad thing is when things come back to normal, human beings will drive them out again. But let's hope they enjoy the interval and that we can enjoy looking at them. And hopefully we'll be a little more welcoming and a little more tolerant of the natural world around us one of these days.
Samriddhi and Vidu, aged 10 and 8, they are writing from Chennai. Dear Mr. Bond, we are enjoying our lockdown nights by bonding for the first time over the radio and listening to your heartwarming and funny stories. Our personal favorite is the story about your grandfather's exciting encounter with the ostrich. We wish we could come and meet you and see Mussoorie through your eyes. We are really fortunate to have this chance of hearing your stories in your voice every evening. We hope that you narrate traveling with Grandfather Zoo one of these days. How are you spending your lockdown? Samriddhi and Vidur.
Well, I wrote many stories about grandfather because he was interesting in himself, and then he always kept unusual pets, although the ostrich certainly wasn't a pet. They encountered it by accident. But for many years, we did have a huge ostrich egg on our mantelpiece. It brought it back from Africa. And unfortunately, it fell and broke when we were moving house in Delhi many years back. But that was grandfather. And as for me and how I'm spending the lockdown, no problem for me because over the years, I've been writing for 60, 70 years and I'm quite used to working from home. I do all my writing at home naturally. So I spend long periods in the house. I've got a room full of books. My bedroom has a window and I can look out on the mountains and on the valley below and the roads below me. So there's never a dull moment. But of course, when the lockdown is over, the first thing I'll do is go out and have a nice lunch somewhere. Hope you will too.
That was storyteller par excellence, Ruskin Bond, reading his hand-picked story of the day in our exclusive series, Bonding over the Radio. Ruskin Bond needs no introduction. Much loved by generations for his enduring and inspiring writing, he's an iconic and prolific literateur, honoured with the Padma Bhushan and Sahitya Akademi Awards. Some of his works that have been adapted for film and television series include Junoon, Susanna's 7 Husbands, Saat Khoon Maaf, The Blue Umbrella, and Ek Tha Rusty. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This came to you from the External Services Division of All India Radio.